Welcome to Pario Magazine, where I chat with individuals who have a desire to create. Today, I'm joined by an indie pop artist whose new EP, Transitions, is just around the corner. Welcome to Pario Magazine, Baileigh Jane.
Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. We're here today to chat about your journey through the world of sort of pop music.
Mhm.
Before we dive into that, do you want to give our audience a little intro as to who Baileigh is away from the microphone?
Yeah, so away from the microphone, I am a queer artist living in Brooklyn, New York, New York City area. Originally, I'm from Florida, though, um, but I actually moved to NYC to be with my long distance partner. We were together for a year and a half, her in New York, me in Florida. And I used to like teach music, perform music under a stage name Conduit. And basically, I performed and I sold weed and I moved to New York. And actually, everything flipped. I ended up starting a queer cannabis social club with my partner called Dank Dykes, um, and doing music on the side. And I actually moving to New York from Florida was a huge change for me, like
Mhm.
culturally, I would say. Um, and yeah, I started a band called Community Sugar because there's more people in New York to play with than in Jacksonville, Florida, and that was great. I made a lot of great connections, but I did see that not everybody has the same direction or aspirations or vision in a band. So really, kind of, it's been I believe like 4 years since I moved, so it's kind of a full circle moment for me right now. Kind of reiterating my solo project, um, now that I kind of have more of a career beneath me to sustain that. And then also, it's like I've been medically transitioning this year. So it's like all the songs I'm actually releasing right now. And for this EP are songs I've written over the years because I've never stopped writing or producing, but you're not always releasing what you're writing. So um, it just became like I was like, oh, I'm gonna release this. I'm gonna release this. Sometimes as an artist, it's like you never do it because you're like in perfectionism. But I
Mhm.
think when I started transitioning, it was like, when do I want to take a snapshot of myself to represent myself? So um, when I was kind of like, no, I want to go back to doing my solo project. Also, I was pursuing medical transition, so even though I could have done things before, I'm like, I really want to do this right before surgery, all this. So there's been like some moments of revisiting music over the past few years in different ways and revisiting myself. And yeah, now I'm just in a place where I like love what I do. Like I just sell weed to, gay people and we have parties about it. And I get to do music as well, which a lot of times intersects actually the queer cannabis stuff I do because cannabis and music are, very much about human connection and relationships. So, yeah, just, you know, being myself and learning a lot along the way.
Yeah, we have a pretty similar story. My partner is also in Florida at the moment. So,
Oh,
like,
wow.
we're very long distance as well. So
You got
it's,
that 6 hour time difference or more, I guess. You're like 12-hour
yes,
time
yeah,
difference.
it's a huge time difference. It's crazy.
Wow.
In terms of music, how did you sort of find that initial passion for music?
So, music actually it's hard to describe because I started writing. I wrote my first song when I was 5. Nobody in my family like was musical. I
Mhm.
remember like a super formative memory before I even wrote that song at 5 years old. Like I remember listening. I think Eminem and Linkin Park were really big on the radio at this point, and I remember like understanding what a verse and a chorus was and listening to how many verse and chorus, trying to count how many times so that I could basically use that structure. And the first song I ever wrote was actually called Granny's Smile. And I feel like, I being in the South, country music was like kind of like my first time of understanding like this is an artist and they make music. This is an album and a music video. Um,
Mhm.
so my mom's mom actually had just passed away, and my first song was about her mom's passing. It was called Granny's Smile because it was more, I guess, about the celebration of life. And I feel like there was a lot of big concepts I was trying to communicate as a 5-year old that I did and didn't fully understand. And really, lyrically is how I started songwriting. And I would beg my parents were divorced. I would beg them for like instrument, I would get a guitar. I would like try and learn through the book. I'm like, this is dumb. But then I found tabs and I was like, taking off. I was like learning Green Day. I was learning all the things. My parents were supportive and not supportive in some ways. Like, I have a lot of siblings. So as I learned music, I would like corral all my siblings and put them on instruments, I would play as a band. My parents loved that probably because I, was babysitting. But
Mhm.
I would beg
Also
for
created a
like,
lot of noise in the house, though.
yeah, hopefully they're probably at work or something. But yeah, I like in my teens, I was teaching myself guitar, piano, ukulele. I My mom got me this 8-track recorder, and with my younger brother, we turned his bunk beds into a sound booth. And I wrote him a song and gave him like a guide track. I was like, "What should we write a song for about you?" He's like, "I like my teacher." And we're like, "Okay, let's write a song about you liking your teacher." And so like I was doing that at 12, like composing a lot, and I had like not a lot of help technically, musically. It was more like I was just learning through doing. And eventually my parents did like take me to get lessons. And over the years I would have different mentors. I can't say that they ever lasted very long, but when you self teach yourself, you feel pretty insecure about the technicalities of things like music
Mhm.
theory and stuff like that. So I did end up going to school for jazz guitar for some time, which opened up my idea of theory and again like technical playing, and I would say contributed a lot to my jazz influence. But I I've always hated school. I've always been like pretty like maybe a loner is the best way to say. Like I just had a hard time interacting in a classroom space. So and a lot of times when you go to school for an instrument, you're not like able to be creative. Like I'm a songwriter. They weren't teaching me like, yeah, write, record your own songs like a pop star. They're like learn jazz or classical music.
Yep.
um, so yeah, I mean, it was just always something intuitive that I was drawn to, and I used to spend so much time like just in my room, lights off, and playing music and writing music. I remember in ninth grade, I would like watch movies or read stories and be inspired by those stories and like write for those. And for a long time, the only people who knew my songs, and I would say I was like very prolific of a writer, were my close friends and family. I was always way too shy to share anything. And I think a lot of that had to do with me feeling like not good enough, it's not technical enough. Um, but then after going to school, I really reached this point where I was still writing. I was like still very much in my practice. I'm like becoming a young adult. I'm like 23, 24 at this time. And I was just like, I need to do something with all of this. And it really inspired me because I would not finish a lot of songs, right? So then when you have to share them, you're like, oh, got a lot to put
It's
together
this is
actually again.
kind of only half done.
Yeah, so in that way, it helped really refine me to be more of an artist that has stuff to share. Um, and even growing up, I would write like I in ninth grade, I read this story about Julius Caesar. It was about the people who killed him, and they were
Mhm.
like, "Yeast sucks." Basically, we're jealous, whatever. And I wrote this story about it, and I showed it to my siblings. My siblings were like always like they were like going hard for the music, and it was my brother who would learn bass. He would be like, "Let's finish this song," blah blah blah. But um, yeah, really just like developing a lot of random skills over the years and then getting to that point where I'm like, wait, I want to share this not just with people who know me. It was like kind of locking in on certain skills, like what do I need to refine to make that sharing more possible. And first it was just finishing a song, but then let's say like 2019, I got a Focusrite and I went from performing with the band to focusing on my solo project and production, which the last time I had done that was when I was 12 years old working on an 8-track recorder. So, um, yeah, it was like I'm always, learning musically. I can't say there's one thing that ever you know, showed me my musical interests as much as it is like just always, I can't, nobody really probably remembers the first song they ever heard, but I know at some point I was like, let me deconstruct this song so I can do it. Yeah.
Do you feel that, like, because you were self-taught from a very early age, do you feel that sort of helped you refine your own sound, not just mimicking what you've been taught?
100%. I do feel like, it's good to try things on to see if they fit. And because a lot of my musical experience has been a trial and error thing, I definitely still step outside of my comfort zone. I experiment with new sounds, but I think through songwriting a lot and through instrumental playing a lot, and then now it's been about 6 years since I've produced, so I definitely feel like I have a sound, and I do pitch a lot of times for sync, and a lot of times when you're pitching for sync in like TV and film, it's like everybody's trying to like write algorithmically. But
Mhm.
the biggest thing they'll say is like, you can be as algorithmic as you want, but just being authentic is, of course, the biggest thing. And really, it all goes back to me. Like, it's always about like a song is a story, even though I am like I love music theory and I love instrumentation and I love just making a beat. I think it's all about the story, and if you can just try and have a strong message and all the other elements supporting that, like, you know, the sound is probably going to be authentic if it just was staying true to that original message you wanted to share, or line that spoke to you, or whatever gave you inspiration.
Does that sort of feedback into those early inspirations you mentioned, like Linkin Park, Eminem, country music, being such great lyricists and story-driven songwriters?
Well, I will definitely say that with pop music in general, there's something relatable, right? That makes it able to be popular.
Yep.
So sometimes that's a beat, sometimes that's a phrase, sometimes it's impactful storytelling. But I remember listening to Sandstorm by whatever that the song Sandstorm. It's like just the
Yeah, Darude.
right. It's like I remember when I heard that when I was a teenager, it speaking to me and it not having to do with lyrics. But I remember the Eminem song, the one we all know, spaghetti song. Um,
Mhm.
that's a very strong verse with a very strong stream of conscious narrative, so that did really speak to me. um it's so hard to isolate what elements of music speak to you, because when we hear a song, there's no independent variable, right? So I think every time I would discover a genre, and I'm still discovering genres as an adult and being like, oh my God, I should really just do a deep dive into this. And sometimes that's like reading a lot about it, listening a lot of it, looking up videos of other people's interpretations and sounds and stuff. So every time it's like, you pick up a genre, or you pick up an artist that maybe does a lot of genres, and it's special how they blend things, and you kind of just take what inspires you, leave what doesn't, and you carry it with you. So all the music, I would say, that I listened to growing up has inspired me, even though like I do not listen to Linkin Park and Eminem now, I have to say. But I'm sure there was like, some type of inspiration that made me um kind of gravitate towards that. I think R&B a lot too was very big for me. It's always different parts of different things. Like for sure, the emotionality of R&B, and particularly in guitar, always like really drew me. Um, but yeah.
And then, like we mentioned in the intro, your next EP transitions is right around the corner.
Mhm.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about the inspirations behind that and how you've gone about putting that together?
Yeah. So basically, as I mentioned before, I've just always been writing music throughout my life, right? And sometimes that's like I wrote a song and I'm singing this song all the time and I want to produce this song now and write it now and it's done in 3 weeks. Most of the time, it's like, let me take this chord progression I made 3 years ago. Okay, made it. Okay, make these words to it. Okay, 2 years go by. Okay, add this. Oh, now it's this. And so it really kind of becomes something over time. And I write way more music than I can share. So I'm definitely an artist that has like a vault of music done.
Mm.
So when I moved to New York, I didn't release anything until I was with the band. So basically, for the past 4 years, is it four? Yeah, 4 years. Although, I've released stuff now, but other than just recently, I've been writing all this music, but not releasing it. Um, So when I kind of like sometime last year, I was like, should I kind of go back to Conduit and just pick that up again? Or should I rebrand? And I really wanted to rebrand because at the time I was doing Conduit, I went by an alias because I just wasn't confident putting myself out there as an artist. And then when I decided, I am going to do Baileigh Jane, I was like, okay, well, what songs am I going to release? Part of me was like, I should record this song and this song that I play. And another part of me was like, actually, just put what out songs you already have. Don't make it another
Don't make it hard for
thing.
yourself.
Yes, and that's kind of going back again to like the you put things off because you're like, oh, it has to be perfect, but you're just kind of procrastinating. So I it was more like I was like, you know what? I had just written the song Non-Issue. Out of all the songs on the EP, it's my most recent song. It's a song that I wrote very quickly, recorded very quickly. I didn't think too much about it. I mean, it's a short song and it's a song that doesn't really have a chorus. It's like, speaking of like being young and analyzing song structure, now I'm like, song I am not very strict about my song structure. So as long as my message gets across, I'm like, I don't care if I return to the chorus or it ends in a part that has nothing to do with the first or what. So that first song, Non-Issue, I wrote it, I think, earlier in the year or maybe the end of last year. And I knew it was just something that I didn't want to sit on very long because I'm like I was trying to be in this mentality of like just do it. Just don't think too much. Just do it. And so I had put that together kind of quicker, and it inspired me to like, yeah, you did it again. You know, you didn't lose your sauce. And then when I did that, I was like, wow, like this is always what happens. It's like, do this song, but it kind of sounds like this song. And like I start thinking about all my songs that I would like almost playlist with it.
Yep.
Um, and so then that's how it's like, oh well, I want to add this one, I want to add this one, and so I added follow to it, which those are the two songs I've recently released, and they're both like I would say non-issue is very indie pop. Follow is a bit more indie rock. Follow is a song that I wrote over several years, probably 5 years time. It's also a song that I recorded live drums on just for fun in my Florida garage with two mics that I ended up keeping. So it is something that it took a long time, but it was still an enjoyable, fun kind of experimental process for me. And the song is is similar to non-issue, but very different in lyrical meaning. Whereas non-issue is like a sweetheart song about my partner,
Mhm.
Follow is more of a song about following your heart and kind of like navigating conflicting feelings about believing in yourself and stuff like that. But really, I added two other songs that, again, I already had recorded. The Better song I'm coming out with this Friday, and then a We Change song. And the Better song is another song that I wrote over maybe 4 years. It was like just a, it was like I was like at home one day writing beats. I was like synth pop. I had heard some synth pop song. I When I listen to music, I will like for sure be that person that like listens to one song on repeat all day long.
Mhm.
And I was really inspired by this one song, and I'm like, this is making me inspired by this genre. I made three beats that day, and I titled one of the beats Synth Pop 3. It was the third beat I made that day, which ended up becoming Better. I came back to the thing. I was like, let me write lyrics to this. It's a very short song. Then I got into New Jeans, which is like, kind of like, I don't know if you know who Jeans is, but it's like a K-pop group, but it's not very K-pop. It sounds like old R&B in garage music is what it sounds like. And I was super inspired by them and their synth sounds, which kind of sound like my synth pop sound. And it was a different lyrical content, one of like confidence. And then I have another song that I wrote more recently. So it's like the beginning of the end of this EP are songs that I wrote recently. The middle
Yep.
is more like songs over several years that I wrote. And We Change is like not like any of them. It's more electronic. So the first half of this EP is more rock focused, I would say. It's more instrumental. It's going to sound more like a band. Whereas the last part of it is more electronic focused, dance focused, EDM focused. Pop can be the overall, you know,
Yeah, pop can be anything.
anything, right? And I would say We Change kind of is like maybe the opposite of non issue, where it's like, you know, would love if this worked out, but it's just not working out. And it's kind of somber, but it's like also good that we maybe move on. And um,
Mhm.
so I really wanted to add, because this is me, you know, reestablishing myself as a solo artist. And because I don't really stay, I would say I stay in this like indie genre, indie pop genre, but I do really like to experiment with sound and genre because I'm inspired by a lot of music. I wouldn't say I listen to one genre. I would say I don't listen to opera and I don't listen to metal music, and that's not going to come up in my music because of that. But I do like to collect a lot of sounds from different genres, and my focus of this EP was really about displaying some contrast. when we mentioned earlier, if not being technically trained helped me find my maybe style as an artist, I do think that, and from what I hear from other people, is like I could have a twangy folk song, I could have an EDM song, but I do think that there's something about me and my writing style that translates through the entire EP. Though the purpose of the EP, it's called Transitions. One, because it's like post my transitioning, but
Mhm.
writing transitions is one of my favorite things to do in music, creating a impactful transition that either is a 180, like you're like I wasn't expecting that, or it's like giving the listener exactly what they want, like this is what I was expecting. So those are one of my favorite parts about writing in general, like any part, just creating dynamics through transitions. um, so I really wanted to give more of a mixtape where it's not genre focused. It's more like displaying a variety, um, that like I kind of want to represent myself or establish myself. Like, it was hard. Like, do I come up with an indie song? Do I come up with an EDM song? How do I tell people? So I thought I'd sprinkle a little everything in there.
Yep. And you mentioned two of the songs that really stood out to me when I listened to the EP. Non-issue spoke to me as obviously as someone who got engaged earlier this year. It sort of
Congrats.
beautifully encapsulated that feeling of
Love it.
when you found the one.
Yeah.
Is that the same sort of feeling you had when you found your partner and decided I'm going to move to the biggest, craziest city in the world?
Well, I will say that in my project Conduit, I ended up writing an entire EP for my partner. That was a pop exploration, and it ended up being a project that was like, it was indie pop, it was folk pop, it was like electronic pop, it was like kind of like hip hop pop. Um, and when we were meeting and we were long distance, there was like a ton of to write about. And now it's like we live together, we work together, we parent together, we love each other. We graduated couples counseling, like we're solid and everything, but we definitely spend like so much time with each other that actually I wrote this. My partner has been also extremely supportive of me throughout my transition, and just really encouraging and supporting. And I wrote this. I think it was definitely a time where I was like, I'm pursuing top surgery. I don't know if it was like probably right before then. And my partner was gone. And I just, sometimes you just get that mood. Like, I just feel like this song's it's coming up. Um, and I just told myself, like, damn, like, I haven't written a song about my partner in a while. And it's like, when you've dated, well, you're long distance, so I'm sure every time you're seeing your partner, you guys have like tons to talk about. It's like first date all over again. But
Mhm.
being in the rut of things and just the day in and the day out, I kind of was like, what can I say that's like meaningful? You know, what can I say that's giving newness to things, and not just to her, but to me. And so I just kind of was like writing, like, we don't always sit down and be our most vulnerable selves with people, especially I think if they're in our day to day lives, is when we kind of let that meaning be more of an undertow to our lives rather than, explicit.
Yeah, it's not sort of
So,
front and center. It's like it's
exactly.
just there all the time, so you don't really address it.
Exactly. So I really just took that song as like it was good for I think it was good for me also, just to like coming back to like newness in a relationship, because I feel like, when I hear a lot of songs, I'm like a lot of songs are about just like meeting somebody for the first time. And it's like I wanted to write a love song that was like you know talk about country. I didn't want it to be like so like, you know, you're my wife, we got kids. I didn't want it to be so like trad wife, I guess. Like, but I
Mhm,
wanted it to be meaningful without being too corny. And I think when I think about this song, Non Issue, I think one way that it made it very easy for me to sing about was I was singing it to my best friend. I was singing it to this companion. Yes, in the end of the song, I'm like, yeah, take your clothes off. But, before then, it's more like, you're my life partner. Like, I tell you everything. There's not an issue we don't have. There's nothing I can't tell you. There's nothing we can't get through. There's, also with partners a lot, I think a huge thing that we do tell each other and we've worked on with each other is like just accepting your partner for where they're at, you know what I mean? We of course change, but like we're growing together, um, is kind of like the vibe and the feeling. And I just really wanted to give this sense of like emotional security more than anything in that song, which as you know, you're long distance. Like my relationship started off with my partner just texting and talking, and
mhm.
you're so far from somebody, but somehow like you do have their companionship gives you this like sense of like just not being alone and always having someone. So that was really what I was like, yeah, trying to get across in non issue.
And then the other song that spoke to me was Better, which has the line, "Craters in my memory, but I'm always gonna have some weed. Fast city, I'm on slow-mo speed." That obviously references
Hmm.
the Dank Blacks
Hmm.
cooperative.
Yep.
How has sort of living in Brooklyn, being surrounded by a supportive queer community influenced your creativity and music?
Wow, so much, because I don't know if you know much about the U.S., but you can imagine New York City. I'm sure it's big, it's metropolitan, there's a lot of diversity. Florida, so the South is not that. The South
Mhm,
is considered the Bible Belt. It's very religious. People are like nice, but it's like it's just very conservative. Um, and it's funny because when I lived in Florida, I lived in a house of trans folks, but I wasn't identifying that way. Um, I also like left. I do not talk to my mom anymore, so I left like this kind of just like my hometown that just had like a lot of you know bad attachment to my identity with it. So going to New York and being around like-minded people, well, one, I tried to go there and not sell weed, but I smoke a lot of weed and that was not financially going to happen. So I
mhm.
was like, I got to sell some weed again. And in in that, I was meeting queer people um, who needed weed, and I also needed friends. So I was like, it really happened very naturally because of that. And when I first moved to New York, I was teaching music still. I had to like take three transfers to go work at this place in Queens, and I actually loved teaching students, and it's something I may end up going back to one day. Um, but I was able to leave teaching to go sell weed pretty much full time. And it's not the selling weed, it's the community. It's because we made ourselves think dykes. If we made ourselves the green hub and like let anyone, it's the community that we ended up centering around it. Because at first it was like we were just serving weed, but then we would be like, wow, we met this queer stoner, we met this queer. They would, they would love to be friends, And we were like wanting to create an opportunity for all these people to connect. And really, what that did is it opened up my lens on queerness, which I didn't realize as somebody who came out in their teens as a lesbian. I didn't realize like how deep it went, really. I didn't realize I was getting a bit of a watered down version in Florida. Not that I wasn't surrounded by, people that weren't as like into the binary or other aspects of like, palatable LGBTQ, but being in the city like just opened me up to meeting people of different ways of interacting in queer ways, and through relationships. I think a huge thing about being in New York City is that you find your people. Um, and I was just really blown away about the ease of doing that. Don't get me wrong, people suck everywhere. People are great everywhere. You know what I mean? But I think there's really more something about when you get to be in front of so many people, you're like, most people honestly rock more than the opposite. Which I think when you're in a smaller town, people are a little more guarded. People aren't putting themselves out there as much. So, you feel more isolated, maybe a little more like stuck in how you grew up or whatever. So, just moving here also with my partner, it became, it just became like a total boost in confidence on like, especially I was like 26 or 27 when I moved here, so it was like I feel like a great age. Like wouldn't want to be any younger, I think, moving here. But yeah, I think between the queer community I surrounded myself with in Dink Dykes, really pushed me to like question myself. I don't think I ever would have felt comfortable coming out as trans or pursuing gender affirming care still living in Florida. Um, and then the other part is when I moved, I was booking gigs as conduit. I was playing solo shows, which is what I would do. I would do some solo shows and some with other freelance musicians in Florida. And I always wanted to start an all queer band or an all woman band in Florida, but there wasn't that many people interested because people were a little more to themselves. So I think finding other people musically too, through music and artistry and through queerness, people's just willingness to put themselves out there and be vulnerable inspired me and the way I live my life, what I'm willing to, not being so shy, I guess. Like realizing, hey, I don't need to go by conduit. I can just go by my name. It's fine, right? Um, and then like I would say creatively, like I I've met a lot of great artists here, musicians. I met a lot of great musicians and artists in Florida too. But
It's New
um
York. There's just that many more.
yeah, and in ways I feel like, it can be just as intimidating, right? It can be just as like, well, you're competing for more. But I think when you try to not compare yourself to others and you make it more about community and wow, like seeing this person do great things and I know them and that's awesome. Like it is
Mhm.
inspiring to just build. I feel like that is such a thing, is like coming to the city and feeling like you can build anything. You're building yourself. You're surrounding yourself with people and the things you invest your time in. And it's like something I definitely did in Florida, but it just kind of, I think, had a brighter meaning because things worked out with my job is a huge thing. Like I ended up having a stable career with my partner, and because that career ended up totally putting me in a safe environment in a queer way, we and with Think Dykes, like we have a team of 10 queer folks that work with us, and we get people wanting to work all the time that are like, I'm trans, I'm nobody uses my correct pronouns, I got fired, and it's like, I feel so lucky to be able to approach music actually now from this place of feeling more confident in myself, more confident in the community that surrounds me. And it's really, I guess, the biggest thing is like it just giving me this confidence to show up, creating every day, and to not compare yourself to others, but let others inspire you instead.
And then also listening to the EP, your roots in Jacksonville in the South, like the sort of country twang comes through in the music. Is that something that you had to like consciously maintain now that you're based? in New York?
It's something that I sometimes try and get rid of, and I just can't. It's like it's like one of those things that I feel like, you know, a
It's
lot of
just in
times
your soul. You
it's
can't
just
get rid of
like
it.
it's just that style. I think a lot of times people they don't find their style because they don't appreciate their style. It's like you sound like this, but then you listen to all this music and you want to sound like that, and that's great. And like as somebody who listens to a lot of types of music, I listen to Megan the Stallion, I listen to all the female rappers, but I'm like, I'm not gonna, I'm not. That's not my sound, right? I might like
Mhm.
certain elements and think certain things are clever. And wow, production or lyrically, wow. But I think that there's been times where I'm like, man, I'm a little too bluesy. I wish I didn't sound so country. I wish I didn't sound so twangy. But you just, then I would release music and it's like my feedback is like people like that. And I don't always think of it. I think of it as twangy, but I guess a way that I've worded it that has allowed me to accept it is it's soulful, it's like, and if I get really into the music theory on things, I'm like that minor third, that pentatonic, that's where it's at. It's like I just like those soulful sounds, and I like, and going back into like R&B and like twang is the sliding notes into one another, so it's not so rigid. Um,
Mhm.
that's something that's very like country, and in fact, I've like really been wanting to get a lap steel guitar to, because it's it's
Really
part
lean
of my
into it.
exactly. It lends itself to my style and to sounds I'm already drawn to. Um, so yeah, I mean, I can't take it's like twangy. Some songs I let myself kind of get more into that, and I definitely have like some country songs and another project down the line. I'm like, I have a lot of songs that would be great with just guitar and vocals because that's uh probably 70% of the songs I've ever written are me singing over guitar. So yeah, but I even when I write a chord progression, I'm like, this is a jazzy chord progression. Then I solo on top of it, and I'm like, oh, here comes the blues.
Not anymore.
Yeah,
So then, obviously, as someone that has been going through a transition process, it's kind of a bit of a scary time for the LGBTQ community in the US at the moment.
yeah.
How are you sort of handling all that, and have you found any sort of creative inspiration from that?
Definitely found creative inspiration. I will say, as like a skinny white person who is again in a career surrounded by queer people, um, and I'm in a very liberal area, metropolitan area, that there hasn't been any, the biggest thing has been the morale. Um, I'm in a pretty privileged place, I would say, as a queer person. Um, the family I don't talk to would have probably been like the biggest obstacle there, but I do think like leaving Florida and not talking to that family like gave me the space to have like the realizations I needed. And I will say, like, also, this is not the case, of course, for all trans people. And I do not identify as a trans man, I identify as trans mask. But growing up, I 100% was like trying to be a boy. My
Mm.
dad was like, you can't pee standing up. You can't put your shirt in and buckle it like I do. They were having to give me some talks. I remember just like always wanting to like be strong and, certain things. So I would say like it's really been more uplifting than anything. I've been pleasantly surprised by the amount of support and understanding I've been given, even from people I didn't necessarily expect it from. Um, in fact, I do talk to my father. when I moved, my father was struggling with alcoholism growing up, so I didn't really have a very close relationship. And when I moved, he was like, it was very bad. Basically, after the pandemic, it was like getting hospitalized, all of that. He ended up getting sober, and actually, no, he smokes weed. Um, but he would follow Dink Dykes, and we do a newsletter. And when I had top surgery, I had to stop smoking weed, and I wrote this article about it, and I put it in the newsletter. And 30 minutes later, when we sent it out, my dad called me like, "Hey, what you getting tops? What's the surgery for?" And I told him, and it was like, "Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I don't really get it. Love you though. I'm not gonna change your mind." So I feel like that was like the biggest, like for me, being in a position. Definitely, me and my partner went to this tiny house workshop, and I told this the instructor that I was getting top surgery, and it was so foul.
Oh,
It was like they were first off, the instructor was like hitting on me and like making it like it. So I've definitely come across things where it's like this is extremely transphobic, and misogynistic and just creepy. Or it's been like
yeah, incredibly inappropriate time to be doing
incredibly
something like that.
inappropriate.
Like, what are you doing?
We definitely left that course and just absolutely blocked, did not say anything. Like, this is uncomfortable. But so it's been both. It's been some, okay, this is some moments of conflict. It's been some like, wow, like these people like support me. I didn't expect that. And I can't say, like, it is an extremely scary time in the US, but it's lent me like creatively. Like I just did this article where I kind of talked about trans joy in a broken world, where it's like, you know things are kind of shit, and when people are having their rights taken away, for a number of reasons here, it's even more important to put our stories out there, to live with trans joy, because that becomes this radical thing that is sustaining. We have to have meaning in a world that feels meaningless, or what is the point? So I think it's definitely inspired me to uh just write and get stories out there. I can't say I ever, a lot of my writing style is like, don't write about happy things unless you have some type of negative thing to juxtapose it. Because a lot of times, like, just doing good means nothing. Being strong, it's like, how can you be strong if you've never had a moment that you've had to prove your strength, right?
Mhm.
So I think more than anything, I guess that's kind of what this time has showed me, is just continue to be like courageous with who I am, regardless of what people think. And a lot of times I'm pleasantly surprised. I really do think that, the whole trans issue here, most for most people, it's not an issue. And I think also the internet, it's like, I thought I do have a lot of trans friends who get bashed on the internet, bullied on the internet by people. I thought sharing myself on the internet, which in a lot of ways was how I've come out to people I'm not, texting. um, you know, that that has been a great thing, I guess. A realization that, like, even though maybe policies are moving a certain way, um, which is still getting a lot of fight. Like, there's a lot of executive orders that are now getting rolled back, um, because they were unconstitutional, and they, had to have a due process and all that. But so I think the biggest thing is, like, there's a lot of problems over here, and things get, people go into panic and they start soundboarding it, and then the internet is there and trolls are there, and you know taking a step back and just focusing on my story, and trying not to worry about judgment. Judgment is going to come either way, right? Everything you do, never going to satisfy anyone. So just kind of pursuing it anyways, and still trying to advocate for myself and others. It's hard. It's sometimes you feel like you're talking to the void, but I guess at the other hand, it's like, you don't have to change policies with your words. Sometimes the biggest thing you can do is connect with somebody else, who feels the same. And that's kind of what I've been inspired to do during this time, especially since I feel like, yeah, I'm coming from this kind of privileged place where I'm I'm able to access resources. I'm able to use resources. I feel safe.
So then, as we close out and look ahead to the release of Transitions, where is the best place for people to support you and track your creative journey moving forward?
You can check out my website, BaileighJane.com, and I do spell my name a little weird. Baileigh, Jane.com. And Instagram, TikTok, I post different things. So depending on what you follow me on, you'll get a little different insight. So Baileigh Jane underscore on TikTok or Instagram. Those would be the best ways to kind of keep up with me. And then, of course, Spotify, Apple Music, stream my stuff everywhere.
Brilliant. Alrighty, thank you so much for taking the time and good luck with
Thank you,
everything.
Jamie. Really appreciate it.